Welcome back to the program. Welcome to our panel this hour. I'm joined by our regular Monday panel of political strategists. With me here in Canberra, Grahame Morris from Barton Deakin, a former Chief of Staff to John Howard, and from Perth this afternoon, ahead of the state election there this weekend, Bruce Hawker, former federal Labor strategist. Welcome to you both. Now, Bruce, first to you. The Prime Minister in the last couple of days in Western Sydney has been focused on traffic, as we've just been discussing, the Western Sydney road congestion issues, gun crime. She announced that task force yesterday to tackle gangs, also cost of living issues as well. She's warning that if Tony Abbott were to win, you'd lose the school kids bonus and various things linked to the carbon tax. Are these the right issues for the Prime Minister to be addressing?
Yeah, I think they are. I think they're the sorts of things that concern people in Western Sydney. Crime is a significant issue out there, particularly guns and drive-by shootings. We've seen a lot of reporting about that over the recent months and years, for that matter. So having this anti-gangs task force is a big initiative for the government. Congestion is a huge problem in Western Sydney, and we've seen that for a long, long time. So reviving the notion of WestConnect, I think, is a good idea, because it would allow for a seamless connection between the western suburbs, in fact all the way through the Blue Mountains and Sydney's CBD and the airport. So I think they're really good moves on her part. I think
just on that WestConnect thing though, just on the WestConnect thing though, do you think it'll look a bit more genuine if there was some dollars attached to this from the federal government?
Well, my understanding was that the figure of $1 billion was being put up. It's too early for me to get any more sense out of than that. But obviously, for this project to go ahead, they would have to make a significant contribution. Mind you, the biggest contribution in all this will come from tolls. Let's not be in any doubt about that.
Well, that's a sober reminder, I guess, to everyone here. The way roads are built, particularly in New South Wales, is through tolls. But Bruce, what about the look of all of this week? The fact that, as you can see there, all those ministers and MPs lining up behind Julia Gillard today for the announcement, it does look a lot like campaigning, doesn't it?
Well, she said there'd be times when she'd be campaigning and times when she'd be governing. I suspect that this is more of a campaigning time. That's what it really looks like to me. But, they are significant announcements that she's making as well. So it's a bit of a mix of the two. And look, I don't think we should get too caught up about that. I'm actually a fan of governments and oppositions campaigning continuously to get their message across. I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are, Bruce. But I think a lot of voters get sick of it. And she did say that they wouldn't be campaigning until August, when we get into the formal campaign mode. Yeah, well, look, I think government's always in the business of campaigning, really, and as are oppositions. I mean, Tony Abbott is a past master at that. So I think the problem that she's got at the moment, though, is that, people are ready to jump all over her before she's even, got this tour underway. If she went into a blazing home to rescue some people, she'd be accused of breaking and entering. So, she should be given an opportunity to roll this package out and judge reaction before she's judged too harshly on it, I think.
Grahame, how do you think she's going so far after a couple of days in Western Sydney?
The Prime Minister had one job in Western Sydney, and that was to say, sorry. You voted for us and we let you down. But she couldn't bring herself to do that. She's come up with some of these cockamamie schemes.
Well, hang on. She probably doesn't feel that she's let people down. Her perspective I'm talking about. She probably doesn't feel she needs to apologise for anything.
Well, she really should. These were sort of battling families, typical of any suburb around the country. They voted for her and she let them down. 10 days before the last election, she was at Rooty Hill. She made 24 promises, 18 of which have been broken 10 days before the election. And here she is now coming out, going to the same sort of area with a whole grab bag of other promises. Her credibility is just not there. And that's the problem. Some of the ideas aren't too bad. But, half of them, she's pinched from Tony Abbott. She's sort of got no idea and no ideas. But it's the credibility of our Prime Minister that's very difficult. And I suspect, you get a bit of a bounce on these sorts of things simply by turning up. But after a week, the people will just go back again and say, well, what was that fuss all about? What did you deliver? Bugger all.
We need to take a quick break. We're going to continue this, though. And look, the importance of this week for the Prime Minister coming ahead of Parliament returning next week. Stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Time to check quickly what's been found in the Essential poll this week. And Peter Lewis from Essential Media Communications joins us this afternoon from Sydney. First up on the primary vote, I see Labor's gone backwards again.
Yeah, Labor's dipped a little bit, David, down to 32 from 34 on our numbers. Coalition stable on 49, Greens up 1 point. It hasn't affected our two-party preferred on the rolling two-week average, which remains at 56-44.
Because that Greens vote is up a little as well, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Just on the Greens, and we don't test this very often, but you've looked at how Christine Milne, the Greens leader, is going in regards to her approval numbers.
Yeah, I guess there's two ways of looking at this story. We've got 20% approval, 33% disapproval. So on one level, well below the relatively low approval ratings of the leaders of the major parties, but double the approval rating of their primary votes. So they've got about 10 primary vote, 20% approval. I guess if you translated that across the major parties, both of them would take it.
Yeah, but no party leader, it seems, is overwhelmingly popular at the moment. On whether voters have actually locked in their vote now, with about 6 months until the election itself, what are people telling you?
This is interesting. So of the options, I've firmly made up my mind 46%, so less than half of those who are answering these polls every week are actually locked in. 31% saying leaning in one direction but could change, and another 22% either saying they haven't made up their mind or they just don't know. Now, on older voters tend to be more locked in. We've got 65% of 55 pluses locked in, but just 35% of those aged under 35 who say that they're set on where they're going to vote come election time.
So expect a lot of battle over the younger demographic. And finally, the mining tax, which will once again be a big issue when Parliament comes back. Very interesting findings here on whether it should go, stay or be increased.
Yeah, and really no clear read here, David. 28% say it should be dumped altogether. That's the coalition position. 29% saying amended to raise more money. That's the Green position. 21% they should be maintained in its current form, which is the Labor position. 21% don't know. Party voting reflects that a little bit, but not conclusively. So it's a really open debate, the mining tax.
Peter Lewis, thanks very much for that. We'll catch up next week.
Thanks, David.
Let's return to Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker. Bruce, to you, we've got another today's poll and another news poll out next week, and that will come just as Parliament returns and all-important meeting of caucus. What do you think? How important is this week for the Prime Minister to make sure there are no stumbles, but also to show that Labor has a light at the end of the tunnel, a strategy to get things back on track?
Well, I think in many ways that polling that you just saw from EMC was a good indication of where they need to be. There's 46% of the population, according to that, haven't made up their mind yet. And so they do have to roll out these sorts of programs and essentially campaigns in places like Western Sydney. I think it's asking a bit to expect that they're going to have an immediate impact. The campaigns traditionally take a while to build up. What they've done in the last few days and will do in the next few days, I think, is to try to lay a foundation and build on that. So I wouldn't expect huge leaps in their support in the short term, although I think there will be a lot of interest in how people in Western Sydney respond to this quite substantial policy and program, output that they're actually going to be running with in Western Sydney. So
do you expect they will? From your experience, do you expect people will respond to the sort of things so far the PM has been talking about?
If she's given a chance to roll them out, yes. If there's a chance to go out there and sell those, not just in 3 or 4 days, but over 3 or 4 months, then I think she's got a real prospect of picking up much better than she has in recent times. I think it's still going to be a big ask for her, but I do think that they've got a plan here, and when you look at it objectively, it does tend to hit the right buttons. It's about health, it's about education, it's about congestion, it's about the things that worry people in Western Sydney. It's well thought out.
Graham, the media, I guess, use the term critical test for the Prime Minister too often, but this week is important, isn't it?
Well, I think it's important. This is there are a lot of resources going into Western Sydney here, and look, to me, the idea that there's eight marginal seats is ridiculous, but there's certainly 4 marginal seats that really count in Western and Sydney, and I suspect they're gone. Look, I'm giving up, give the Labor Party good advice on leadership. Look, if they want to be... The Prime Minister's doing wonderfully well, fellas. She's going, hang on to her. and as you little lemmings go over the cliff, I'll salute.
Now, on the other side, for the opposition, we've seen Scott Morrison, the Shadow Immigration Minister, clarifying some of his remarks around asylum seekers, but still... with clearly a desire, Graham, to have a stronger requirement on asylum seekers living in the community for authorities to know where they are, particularly those who are in accommodation that's been lined up through a government-approved provider, and behavioural protocols he's talked about as well. This has been labelled a dog whistle by many, a subliminal message to some voters who can't stand asylum seekers. What do you think? Did he go too far in his remarks?
No, I don't think so. You know, look, there are people like the Red Cross and some of the hospital organisations, St Vincent's. They do a magnificent job trying to find places for these people who aren't quite refugees, but they're not asylum. They're asylum seekers, but they're not yet legal or illegal, yeah. And they're out in the community. But it didn't seem to me an unreasonable idea that, say, every quarter the government ought to publish, say, by electorate or postcard where these people are. And also, you know, just imagine we've had one awful incident involving a sort of an asylum seeker, but what would happen if there were 2 more next week? And I think Scott Morrison is saying, look, fellas, let's do something before we really do have a problem here with the Australian community, because a couple more and we would have real difficulty in the community. But apart from that, you know, why are we saying that Australians are necessarily going to react the wrong way? You know, if I had an asylum seeker perhaps in my street, I might go around with a casserole and invite him round for a barbecue.
Well, I'm sure you would.
I hope you would.
Bruce,
I hope you would. I think, yeah, well, from my perspective, I think it was a disgrace. And it wasn't a dog whistle, it was a bullhorn that he was sounding out there. And it was based around one alleged incident. And as George Megalogenis pointed out the other day, I think that's 5 out of 12,000 involving asylum seekers. In the federal parliament, there are 3 people who are either facing charges. So that's 3 out of 226. So let's be very, very careful about the path we tread here. I think it could take us down a very unsavoury route. As Dennis Shanahan said the other day, you know, what are we going to have? Big A's on their clothing so they can be marked out from the rest of the population, put them in special uniforms? You know, this is the sort of attitude that can take hold in the community, and it is extremely unhealthy. And I'd hope that Tony Abbott would do something to stamp this out right now before it takes hold in his party. There are some good people like Russell Broadbent who are making, and Mal Washer, who are making very strong statements about this, and you know, they should be endorsed by their leader.
Well, perhaps we should, on the basis of that, have a register of where politicians live in the country.
No, the police ought to know. The police ought to know where they are. They really should.
All right, we need to wrap it up on that note.
Sure.
We're out of time. Bruce Hawker, Grahame Morris, good to talk to you both. Thanks. We'll catch up next week.
Thank you.
After the break, we're going to return to Western Sydney and have a look at all of that. And we'll also look at some interesting housing data out today. Not very good news, in fact. Stay with us.